to get access to the alternator, the first thing you'll need to do is remove the center portion of the intake manifold, the resonance tube. I've removed this piece on the side here as well. You don't need to do that, because what we're trying to do is get access to these electrical connections. There's this one here. There's going to be this tab that's been removed clearly, but that'll be pushed all the way in, and you'll just need to get a screwdriver and pull that rearward. Comes back maybe 5 or 6 millimeters or so, and once you do, and it looks like that, then you can push down, and that's going to be on, open the tab, and then you can wiggle that off. The other one here, which is for the main output from the alternator, there's going to be a nut on the end of there. That'll be sitting in there like that, but this cover will be over the top, and this rubber just has sort of a little thing that goes over the top and holds it in place. So if you get a screwdriver in there and then lever that outwards like that, that'll just come straight off, and then you have access to that. And that's all you need to do on this side. At the front, first thing we need to do is loosen the drive belt. So just get a 30mm spanner onto the tensioner there and rotate that down, and then that'll just come loose, and you can just put that off to the side. We'll need to move this low pressure fuel pipe. This comes from the fuel tank down to the high pressure fuel pump down here. It's stuck into these sort of clips things here, these grommets. There's one there, obviously one there that I was pointing to before. They just get pulled out. Now when you're pulling on those, it's a bit hard to see, but they sort of look like that. So when you're pulling them out, it's really hard to pull them out. And as you can see, there's plenty of movement in that. It's actually quite loose, but when you're pulling them out, it feels like you're going to break the things, and it's only because they're held so tightly by these things. So you need to pull this one up and this one towards you. And what I found was with this one here was to wrap sort of a strap around this and gently pull rather than trying to get your fingers in there. Helped a little bit. And then once that comes loose, because without that there, the pipe sits further rearward and it's going to get in the way, because we need to get the alternator and move it up probably about a good inch or so to get this thing out. And without this moved forward like that, it's not going to be able to come out. Once it's like that, we've got the 2 screws here. They can just come out. And the way these work is that the alternator sits on sort of a lug on both sides, so the bolt goes through the front part of the alternator here and screws into the back part down the back. And this doesn't have much torque on it. It's only 15 Newton meters when you install it, but even with those bolts out, it doesn't just come out, it's jammed on those lugs. So we need to get those lugs out. And the best way to do that, I found from what I've been doing, is just getting a pry tool and then just gently pull up like this, and it'll rotate it out. Now if you need to get a piece of timber underneath there like that, just to help you out a little bit more, then go ahead and do that. And then once it's off one side, then we can wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Now I've already removed this, so it's relatively loose. And then I've just sanded things back a little bit just to get all the corrosion, everything off it, but then everything comes out. It was a little bit more difficult the first time, but that's the best way to do it. And then once it comes out, you can see we've sort of got a lug there. Funnily enough, that one's not a hole, it's sort of a slot. That one there is the hole that goes through to the back. That's where it screws into at the back. And all I've done prior to installation is you just gently sand, because there's going to be some corrosion stuff in there, put a bit of grease, and then it's going to go back in there much more nicely. And then when you're putting it back in, it's just the reverse. Like that. And what I've found is the easiest way to do it is to, don't try and push it down because it just won't go down, is to wiggle it down at this end first, put the bolt in, don't tighten it, and then we're actually going to sort of push it down and hit it with a mallet and a piece of timber on the other side. So I'm just going to wiggle that down and look through the hole. And then once it's in, you can screw that in just a few turns. And then I'm going to push it down on the other side. Now that's slotted in quite nicely, but initially it was pretty difficult. And all I did was just use a stick and a mallet and just come down the other side here and give it a bit of a gentle tap on the top of the alternator to push it down. And when you're doing that, look in the hole here to see how far it's going down. And when it's nearly all the way home, you don't have to wait till it's all the way there because it's a slot. You can put it in there, screw it in a few turns, and then once it's screwed in a few turns, then go ahead the other side and give it a few whacks with your mallet and a piece of timber just to push it all the way down against the bottom of that slot, and then you can torque them correctly. Something that I didn't mention before that it does talk about in the workshop manual, it's when you initially loosen off these screws that hold on to the alternator. It says to turn them out about 3 turns, and then with your spanner or with your socket on there, give it a bit of a whack with a hammer, just gently. And I think the idea of that is just to loosen up the back connection a little bit if there's corrosion and stuff. I'm not sure how much difference it makes, but that's what it says to do. To get the cover off the back of the alternator, don't start unscrewing the Phillips head screws in there. I don't know why they have these holes. It doesn't actually give you anything at all unscrewing those, because this thing's clipped on, and the way it's clipped on, I'm not sure if you can see, but in these little curved sections here, there's a little lug there which is going to clip behind each one of those, and there's 3 of those. There's one there, there and there, which correspond to that position, and that position there. So you basically just need to get a screwdriver in there and push it out sort of that way, and then get something to lever on and just work your way around. And then this is the voltage regulator here. On the inside of that, there are these 2 pins here with little lugs. They've actually broken off in this one, little barbs that you just need to get really skinny screwdrivers down in here and push sideways to allow that to come free. It takes a bit of effort, but you eventually get there. And then you have access to the other side of it. I'm not going to pull apart the whole thing, but enough said that the voltage regulator comes off really, really easily. Just those 4 screws there, and that thing just comes off. You can buy these things to replace if that's required. This thing still had mountains of brush left on it. The slip rings have got some grooves in them, but nothing horribly bad. But you could easily replace the voltage regulator if you need to. And I don't think it'd be too much of a stretch if you're this way inclined, but I'm not going to just rip the whole thing apart, but just to unbolt this, knock it apart, and replace the bearings, etc., if that's what you wanted to do.